Hey guys, my name is Jade Mitchell and I'm the nutrition educator with the Galveston County Food Bank. I'm so excited to be here with you today talking about how to read a nutrition label. We will go over just the basics of how to read a nutrition label. You can find nutrition labels on several different types of foods: canned items, bagged items, boxed items. So a lot of the foods that you consume are going to have nutrition labels located on them. They can be intimidating to read because they contain a lot of different information, but what we'll go over today is how actually easy they are to look over and how they can help you determine what all of these different numbers mean. So if you're ever dealing with a chronic disease, or if you have someone in your family that has a chronic disease, you can actually utilize this to help you make sure that you are reading it correctly and consuming foods that are good for you. So we'll just start from the top and we'll work our way down on the nutrition label. We'll start with the serving size per container. So this is very important because it can get a little tricky. Just because you have one nutrition label on an item doesn't mean that it's just that these numbers are only for the one item. The serving size will actually determine what that's for. So I'll give you an example. This is a bag of just your regular potato chips. The nutrition label on the back shows that it's actually for 3 serving sizes per container. So what you would want to look at is it's 150 calories per serving, but when you multiply that, you're going to end up with 440 calories per container. So what you would really want to focus on is if you're planning on eating the entire bag of this, is this number. If you were going to eat about 1/3 of the bag, then you could focus on 1/3 portion of the serving size, or the numbers. So that's really important. That's probably one of the key takeaways, is that you want to always want to start by making sure what your serving size is, because then it's going to determine what the rest of these numbers mean for the nutrition label. So the next portion of the nutrition label is going to be your calories. Calories are the total energy that the food item is going to give you. Calories do determine a lot when it comes to how many are in food items. Most of the time when you're considering eating a food, if it's 100 calories or less, it's going to be a moderate amount of calories. And if it's 400 calories or higher, that's going to be a high amount of calories. That's important because what you want to make sure of is that you're not over-consuming calories throughout the day. Most healthy adults want to stay around a 2,000 calorie diet. And so if you're over-consuming 2,000 calories a day based on your needs, then you could end up being overweight based on over-consuming calories. It also goes in the other direction. If you're not consuming enough calories, you could be considered underweight and have health problems from that aspect as well. Again, we'll continue just going down. So we've got our fat levels. We've got total fat, saturated fat, trans fat, and these are things that we're going to want to limit. We've got our daily percent value over here on the side, and we'll go over that in just a minute. One major thing that we want to focus on these days is sodium. A lot of different canned items are loaded with sodium, and I'll give you an example. We have a can of no salt added sweet peas, and we also have a can of just regular sweet peas that you would get from the store. The no sodium added sweet peas have 15 milligrams of sodium with 3.5 servings in the entire container. Whereas if you have the same serving size from this can that does have sodium added, you've got 3.5 servings, and you're going to go up to 290 milligrams because this has sodium added. So 290 milligrams of sodium versus 15 milligrams of sodium in this can is a huge difference. That would be something that you'd want to focus on, especially if you have any type of issues where you should limit your sodium consumption. One good way of going about making sure that you still have flavorful foods and not over consuming sodium is adding your own spices or your own flavors to canned food items. Don't be scared to add things to canned food items on your own at home. If you like particular flavors, but you don't want to overdo your sodium, that's one way of going about making sure that you still have flavorful foods. The last thing we want to talk about of the information that we want to limit on the nutrition label is added sugars. So you're always going to have your total sugars here, and then you're going to make sure, or you're going to have the additional information here for added sugars. This is the number that you want to make sure that you're limiting. Down here is the added sugars. Here we have a bag of dried mangoes. And typically for dried fruit, they're going to be a little bit higher in sugar content, but what is really positive about this is that there's 0 grams of added sugar. Next, we're going to move on to the information in the green. So I've got protein and fiber, which are going to be 2 of the larger, your macronutrients up here, or protein is a macronutrient, and fiber is just something that's great to consume regularly. Your fiber content here, protein is an extremely important macronutrient. It's going to be what keeps you full throughout the day. It's going to be what helps control hormones and enzymes. It's extremely important for us to consume enough protein so our bodies can function normally. And what I want to pinpoint is that by reading a nutrition label, it might help you be able to afford things better. So you might say, well, I can't afford a lot of really high protein food items because they're a lot more expensive if you start thinking about salmon or chicken breast. But that's not necessarily the case, because this tiny can of, we'll look at the serving size. So this is just going to be 1 serving, but this tiny can of chicken breast has 8 grams of protein in it. So you could always go for an alternative option to chicken breast by buying a can of chicken in water and getting some of the same protein. To move on down to our micronutrients, down here at the bottom of the label, these are also things that you're going to want to make sure that you're consuming enough of. These are your vitamins that you're going to be getting out of the food that you're reading the nutrition label for. And again, to go over to the daily value for the day, this is about 6% of what you would need of this particular item for the day, 8% of the vitamin, of the calcium that you would need for your total intake. You want to make sure this is lower in the numbers of the things in the red. So this would have a lot of sugar for your daily value. So 5% or less of a nutrient is considered low. That's a little high. That's very high. And then 20% is considered high. So going back to the added sugars here. So this would be a high added sugar food. The very last thing on the nutrition label is going to be your ingredient list. Ingredient lists are labeled out by weight. So first in the ingredient label are going to be what's used more within that particular item. So this particular food's first ingredient is brown sugar, and then oatmeal, which is one of the reasons why we have such a high added sugar value up here. By reading the nutrition label on canned items, frozen items, and store brand items, you can make sure that you're not sacrificing quality. Because if you have a name brand item versus a store brand item, all you have to do is just look on the nutrition label and make sure that you're not losing any of your nutrients from your store brand versus your name brand. And then you're actually going to be able to save a lot of money by buying name brand or by buying frozen fruits and vegetables or canned fruits and vegetables versus fresh foods without sacrificing the quantity. So hopefully today we've gone over a lot of the nutrition label questions that you might have had, and that this will be helpful for you as you do grocery shopping in the future.